sounds like it was a annual currency flight, so they're just kind of doing some training of the routes and everything else, but a very experienced air crew, and they would know those routes like the back of their hand, and have flown them hundreds, if not thousands, of times. And it looks like they were returning on a return flight coming back south on the Potomac, just came over the 14th Street Bridge, and were making their turn due south to follow the Potomac back to Davidson. And that's when they intersected with the plane, the commercial airlines plane that was on short final for runway 33. So those two intersect in the same place. And look, the Army Safety Center has a team on the ground. They're going to come to find all this stuff. But most likely what they're going to find is that the air crews were doing everything right. They were within their corridors. Both the commercial aviation landing runway 33 into Reagan and the southbound helicopter within that, corridor. They were both within their corridors, but they should have been deconflicted by air traffic control, as they should have been separated, because they were asking for visual separation that they could see each other. But the problem is this was happening at 9 o'clock, 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock at night, and the Army air crew was under night vision goggles. It is very difficult to pick up the lights of a plane, from half a mile away, with the lights of Alexandria in the background. You just can't distinguish between those two. It becomes very, very difficult. So they should have been deconflicted and moved apart, and should not have been in the same space like they were. Like we just said, this is one of the most congested and controlled airspaces on Earth. And so to think we would be short-staffed with all the planes that are moving back and forth, planes and helicopters moving in that space, you cannot be short-staffed. Yeah, well, again, this was at night. So this was, I think, 9 o'clock at night when the collision occurred. And so, no, a Black Hawk is not going to be visible to commercial pilots who do not fly with night vision goggles. So they're just flying the runway heading in on that runway 33, and the helicopters coming the opposite direction. They're under night vision goggles, but it's very difficult to see. An airplane with its lights on, it's coming towards you. Those lights are going to blur and blend with the lights of Alexandria and every city and town around that area. So it's going to just be a blur of lights. And so it's very, very difficult to distinguish. And those corridors operate under what's called visual flight rules, or VFR. And so you're flying low level along the Potomac. You can see everything. At night, those visual flight rules still stand, but it is very difficult to pick up, again, other aircraft flying at your basically same altitude, backdropped against the city lights. It'd be very difficult to see. And that's why you would never have those two aircraft in the same area. You would have vectored around or moved them around to a different area. The recording that's, at least that I've heard put out, is the Army aircraft is asked to pass behind the commercial aircraft, and that is very, very difficult to do at night under goggles. Again, in a congested airspace, to make that kind of deconfliction between and see that and make those moves is very, very difficult at night. So again, they could have held up the Black Hawk, slowed it down, kept it north of the runway for the plane to proceed. They could have done a lot of things, but if the plane was landing due north on the primary runway at Reagan, this wouldn't be an issue, right? Because it's flying straight up the Potomac north to land. But they pushed it out to runway 33, which then sends it east over the bank of the river and kind of over that side of the river, which would then make it crossing the VFR route or the corridor for the Black Hawk. So there's a lot of questions, I'm sure, about why decisions were made, but it seems that this horrible tragedy could have been averted if there was better control of the airspace by the air traffic controllers. If you're flying without goggles, like the commercial crew was doing, then you just see the city lights, right? And that's all you're going to see, and so you're going to be flying a lot of your instruments. And so you're kind of flying the river, which is the dark spot. You're flying that river up as your guide, and you're flying obviously compass vectors, but you're using that as your kind of visual guide, and your city lights on both sides. If you're flying under goggles, you can see some pretty good detail. The goggles are pretty amazing, but you can see some pretty good detail, but not at distance. At distance, it gets pretty grainy, and so you can just pick out mainly primary light sources like lights. And so those lights would be backdropped against, you would be able to see those lights backdropped against Alexandria, which is the way that they were headed. The Black Hawk was headed directly towards Alexandria. So you would see those lights coming at you mixed with all the city lights. It'd be virtually impossible to distinguish. No, it's a horrible tragedy. I think that the fear in all aviation for everyone who's flown is that they instinctively come back with some sort of pilot error, right? That was a contributing factor. Both of these air crews on both sides were very experienced. I know for the 12th Aviation Air Crew, I know they knew those routes again like the back of their hand, and they've flown them hundreds of times. Experience and their decisions, I think, factored very little to, if any at all, into this tragedy. They really should have been, it should have been prevented by better control by the air traffic controllers and separation. So they never should have intersected. And that's my judgment sitting here. Again, the Army Safety Center has teams on site. They'll figure out everything as to how this tragedy happened and can be prevented in the future. But I'm pretty sure that they're going to find out that we didn't have the control that we needed to from the air traffic control facilities.